Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Phase 2 Advisory Board meeting, first meeting of the new year. I'd like to remind everyone, of course, this is a public meeting that is being recorded and also will be posted on, we post all of the meetings on YouTube. So just like to remind everyone of that. We'll start with the roll call. Stephen?
Here.
Lieutenant Britt? Diane? Lieutenant Britt, you're on. I'm sorry, Lieutenant Britt, are you on?
I am on.
Okay, thank you. Diane?
Yes, I'm here.
Jay?
Here.
Steve?
Here.
Lisa?
Here.
Sherry?
Here.
And Detective Sergeant Dubrow, are you on?
I'm on.
Okay. All right. Now we will have the review and approval of the last meeting minutes.
Good afternoon, everybody. These minutes are from the December 11, 2018 meeting. The welcome and introduction were given by Terrence Samuel. The members present were Stephen Bowley, Stephen Birch, Lieutenant Britt, Diane Buck, Diane Buck on the phone, Lisa Cullen on the phone, Sherry Smith on the phone, and Detective Dubrow on the phone. Additional members who were at the meeting are listed. The review of the meeting minutes was given by Rachel Graham, and they were approved for November 13th, 2018. The IVNB update was presented by Aline Calvo for Phase 2. The stakeholder outreach was presented by Jessica Espinoza and Kathy Thomas. Continuing on to page 2. Several portal policy and decisions were reviewed by Judy Johnson. Continuing on to page 3. Several registration and title decisions were reviewed by Kathy Thomas. Continuing on to page 4. And one decision for dealer services by Felicia Ford. Janice Timmons presented the financial review. Project updates were provided by Terrence Samuel and Michelle Denley. There was no communication update at the meeting. And there were some questions asked at the meeting. They're listed there. And the meeting was adjourned at approximately 3:28 p.m. And the list of handouts that were at the meeting is noted.
Any corrections, comments? All right, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you, is there a second?
A second.
Thank you, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, any opposed? Okay, we will mark them as approved.
Okay. Next on the agenda, we have our IVNB update. So, Ellie.
Hi everyone, we'll be going over the November reports. This is material through the 14th of December. So current risk state is green. SPI is at 0.897, so that's right at that box of within schedule parameters. It's trending late. So you'll see a trending arrow on our graph in the next page showing that is trending negatively. Those are the Uniface tasks that we've talked about at the last meeting, and there's a few meetings that have been going on. We'll also be meeting with the team on Thursday to go over some of the Uniface tasks that are driving that SPI to be so low, or trending low. Outside of that, everything else is on the within the schedule parameters, the budget parameters, and so there's where you'll start to see that's right outside of that, or right on the edge of that green box, so starting to show some concern in the schedule. We'll also be talking a little bit about what are the downstream effects of those unit-based tasks, what does that really impact going forward? And so you'll see that ballet starts to get a little bit bigger, the 2,298 hours that have not been completed that were planned at this time. We can look at, so looking at the dates, or sorry, it's getting really fast. Forecasted days later, looking at 385, that's due to the SPI trending late. There is a pretty long time frame in front of us, so when we see something like that this early, it's really just an early indicator. So watching those things, making sure that things are being put into place to correct some of the schedule slippages. I know some of the Uniface individuals are being ramped up and extended, so we'll be discussing with the team as this progresses to see how that impacts the schedule overall. Schedule quality continues to be really good at 96.2. The last one that we cover. Any questions on any of those? Thank you.
And as I always like to explain a little about the Uniface, I think the board members all know, but we have members of our team that are actually going through the software to make sure we're documenting what the system does now. Over time, the department's lost, people on the motor vehicle side of the house, but we would do this anyway, just to make sure we have strong documentation on how the system is behaving now, and we bring that to the meeting as part of the requirements and work with the business folks. So that's the Uniface task that Ellen is referring to. You'll probably hear Nathan bring it up as well. Just a step that we do to make sure we covered everything. And as I said before, those tasks are trending late, and we have some things we're doing with resources to try to mitigate that. So stakeholder outreach update. CT, you want to give us an update?
Yes, the tax collector SMEs are traveling up here next week. They'll be traveling Monday and then traveling home Friday, but they'll be here Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday to meet with the teams and work on their increment 2 business rules. And we're also having an all-hands meeting with everybody on Wednesday morning, where there'll be like 70 or 80 people there, I think, to go over, let everyone know where we're at and what we're doing and see if anyone has any questions or issues. So that'll be next week, so it'll be a busy week for everybody. We hope to get a lot done.
Okay. And Nathan, do you have anything additional about the all-hands meeting? I don't know.
No, it'll be the first one that we've had since some of the new team members from the tax collector community has joined, so it'll be some of their first time to be here. So we'll make sure we'll greet them and put a face to a name. And the feedback we've heard from other folks who have come up here is that we start to be more productive, even on the phone sessions after they come up.
Okay. And also, as part of stakeholder outreach, I mentioned this in our phase 1 meeting, although it's our phase 2 item. We're working to, this afternoon we have a meeting planned to schedule a phase 2 focus group meeting. That's where we meet with members that Lisa has recruited for us. We normally meet with 3 different groups. We have a portal focus group, a global group, which is inventory,
Et cetera.
yeah, inventory reports, cashiering. We meet with that team, and then titles and registration. So we're trying to decide if those are 3 separate days, or if it'll be half days for 1 or 2 of them, or whatever. So we're going to meet this afternoon to plan it out, and then get with Lisa to make sure her space is available, and then we'll start sending out invitations to the focus group members. The focus group members, just so everyone knows, is different than the SMEs that come up next week. The SMEs are involved on a daily basis with the team. Every time there's a meeting, the tax collector SMEs are pretty much on the phone. As a check to that, we have the SMEs that are participating, but we also like to reach out to a broader group. The focus group can run things by those folks as well. So we'll be doing that sometime this month or beginning of February, that we're going to get everybody back together, hopefully in Titusville. Is there any other phase 2 outreach that I have neglected to mention? Okay. All right. Now we will go over policy and decision review. This is, I think our last meeting I said this would be quick, and we were here for a little longer than I anticipated, but who's first?
I am.
So on page 1, portal, item number 2, this was actually closed. We reviewed it in our last meeting, we presented it to ESC in the ESC meeting that was held on November 13th. And in that meeting, the decision was made to also allow the processing of bulk titles. So we can now close that item. If you flip over on the next page, Portal 04 was also closed as a result of the ESC meeting.
And Judy, could you just remind everyone of what these are that are closed as we go through?
So Portal 4 was the ability to process title transactions within the portal. We finally got a final agreement that we would allow certain transactions with under certain criteria. We're going to have some smaller teams come together to work through all of those business rules as to what specifically those conditions are that we will allow for those transactions to take place. The next on the list is Portal 06, which is on page 3. This is for us to review which services that will be offered in a new phase of kiosk transactions. We still are waiting to schedule a smaller meeting with a subgroup to discuss and review those items, so this item is still under review. Next on the list, we have Portal 07, which is the request we spoke about here the last time. Was a request to allow biennial registrations for tribal plates such as like the Seminole, Miccosukee Indian plates. We had the board recommendation, we took it to ESC, and right now we're waiting on legal to review and make sure that we do have the statutory authority that those fail within the current statutes for biennial registrations. So we have an open item with legal on that. For Portal 08, we had a request to allow the issuance of permanent decals for tribal registrations. We had a suggestion from this board to ask for us to reach out to the tribes themselves to see if they're interested in having permanent decals. I took that back to the business partners, and they are currently reaching out to the tribe managers to get their feedback and their take on that particular request. So we're still waiting on a response from them. Portal 9 was about the fleet maintenance process and maintaining the accuracy. There's a requirement that states that to participate in the fleet program, you have to have a minimum number of vehicles. We currently ran some stats, and they were provided in the last meeting, and we have some fleets that are not meeting those minimum requirements. It was this board's decision that suggested that we try to do some outreach and educate the fleet owners before we actually start enforcing those minimum requirements. I sent that information to Robert Kynock, and he was going to work with some of the members in his area to look further into that communication with the fleet owners. So that particular item is still open. New on the list is Portal 10. The Portal team is currently working on the parking permit registrations in the new portal application. And as we were going through our business rules and the procedures, there was a procedure that states that in order to have a parking permit, you had to have a valid DL or ID card. Sometimes we use those terms loosely, so we wanted to fully understand what valid meant. If we were to enforce, does that mean it has to be non-expired, no sanctions? Because I know when we were doing a renewal project, there was an issue that came up when we were reporting stops. We said we wouldn't stop them from renewing if a person had like a bad check stop or something like that. We would let that go through. So we wanted to further clarify for DL and ID requirements as it pertains to the issuance of a parking permit. Do we still want to enforce that? What does valid mean? Does valid mean it's not expired? Or are we going to also ignore if they had sanctions or any other infractions on their license? So at this point, I guess we'll look to the board to see if we have any recommendations on how we should go forward with enforcing that requirement.
The sanction would be against their ability to drive.
Correct.
The person needs the permit because of a handicap situation, so I would think that the sensible thing to do in my mind would not be to hold that against them and allow the issuance, while we would still require them to have the DL or the ID card.
So it
So
still
if there
needs
was
to
a
be,
sanction on the DL, I don't see why you couldn't go ahead.
but it would still need to be not expired, like it still needs to be active or whatever.
That, as I
But-
understand it, that's that way for anyone who gets a parking permit.
Okay.
So that's just my thought.
Anybody else?
Your thought?
This is Sherry in Sarasota, and I completely agree with that. Issuing the parking permit does not give them permission to drive or operate the vehicle. They ride with me or anyone else and use that parking permit. I do believe Val is in that situation, current DL ID card, but I would not hold the connection against them.
Okay, we will capture that as this board's decision and take that forward to ESC.
Was there any other comment from any of the guests? Okay.
The other part of that item is as well in those procedures when it comes to businesses that apply for parking placards. A business can get subsequent placards, but it's supposed to be for the number of vehicles that they have titled or registered in their name. Currently in the system, there are no, that isn't being enforced. There aren't any edits or validation rules to prohibit that. So the team wants to enforce those rules, and so we wanted to kind of get the feel on the board as to should we be enforcing that. And of course, once again, is this something we're going to do with some type of outreach ahead of time to kind of let them know you're currently out of compliance, you have, 10 park permits, but you only have 5 registered vehicles, and is that something we want to enforce on the portal? Maybe on portal, we don't allow them to renew them, but maybe those who have more than they have registered would have to come into an office to submit something or show something or whatever.
Well, I would suspect that you probably have vehicles titled in an organization's name in more than one way. What do you think, Sherry?
I would totally agree with that. We
So-
have a certain organization here in Sarasota County that accepts volunteers that sign up to take primarily elderly people to doctor's appointments, to the grocery store, to places like that. So they many times will get one for a volunteer that is transporting their customers, their clients. So that organization may not have any vehicles in their name because they depend on volunteers to transport. So I would hate to limit theirs.
And I would hate to have people change titles just to fall into the correct naming and numbering.
So then,
So in looking at the number of parking permits issued to businesses, do we have a problem? Do we have many businesses out there that have an unbelievable amount of parking permits?
so we just discussed this in our meeting last Thursday, and we haven't had time to request stats to see how many are out of compliance. So we'll try to get those stats and have them before we take it to ESC, just to see what the numbers are that we're looking at. But I just know that previously we've had a lot of issues with fraud as it pertains to parking permits, and so this was one of those areas where we were hoping to try to clean up some of that activity.
Yeah, I would be interested to see, yeah, that's good.
Okay.
This is Diane. Do we do any type of inventory control? I mean, do the businesses send us a list of the vehicles that they are using, or can they? If they're not titled and registered in Florida, like the example was, maybe they have people working for their business providing a service and they get parking, but decals for is there any way we can keep some kind of an inventory? They should be able to identify the driver and the vehicle identification, just a suggestion.
I guess, I mean, we can, like I said, once we'll run the stats, I guess we can do some type of outreach to kind of look to see if it is a situation where they're using volunteers, outside of that. And if they are, then maybe they should produce something to say, this is the exception as to why we need more. And maybe those need to come in through an office and not be done through the portal. So that's what we're just trying to look at. So we'll try to get the stats first to see what the numbers are, and maybe reach out to, when we find some of those entities that are out of compliance, reach out to them to find out what is the particular scenario. Is it the situation with the volunteer, or is it just that they just renew it because it doesn't cost anything, and every year they just send it in and
Or
they
they
just
just
got
get
it?
another one because they lost one and.
Correct. Okay, so we'll do some more follow-up with that.
Are there any other comments on the earlier issues that Judy went over? I know she's going through some of those, and I want to give everyone a chance to ask any questions. Any questions or comments about any of the items that Judy discussed? Okay.
Okay, on page 4, registration 5, this was, should the system perform a NVIDIS or inlets check on registration-only transactions? The team has decided way back in October, I gave you guys an update, that we're just doing this on NVIDIS, we're not doing it on inlets. After we talked to FHP and talked to AMVA, they pretty much bring back the same information. So we're just gonna do an NVIDIS call. We did also decide to do the web solution, the web service solution with AMVA. And the last update is I'm working on rescheduling a follow-up conference call. And also Boyd wanted us to send AMVA some documentation, official documentation for our new use cases. So Robert is taking the lead on doing that. So I'm working with Boyd and Robert to schedule the next conference call. So I will close that because the web solution was what we decided to go with. Any comments from anybody? Visitors? The next page, registration 6.
I have a question.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
So if the NVIDIS call, did we decide if the NVIDIS call can't be made, NVIDIS was down, will that stop the registration like it
No,
is the
ma'am.
time?
No, we just go on actual limit. Anything else? Okay, next page, page 5, registration 6. This is for specially plate voucher transactions. The team wanted to create a specially plate voucher transaction to transfer in case the person that they bought the voucher for does not own a motor vehicle, or there was a death in their family or whatever. Right now, currently they can't transfer that voucher to anybody. The ESC recommended it would be good customer service. They agreed with you guys, so we're going to close this and we're going to create the transaction. Any comments? Visitors? Okay. Reg 7, this was on dealer processing bulk issuance instead of one at a time. We took this to ESC. They agreed with you guys that as long as we kept track of their GLI limits to make sure that, you know, they didn't have more plates than what their insurance policy allowed, then it would be okay to issue them in bulk instead of one at a time like they're doing currently. So, is everyone good with that? We're going to go ahead and close this item. Visitors, any comments? Reg 8. Decision on scanned cover sheets be printed for all the registration corrections. Advisory board said only on the ones that we have documentation that needs to be scanned to the record as proof, like if they're changing the weight or changing the VIN. ESC did agree with you guys on that. It would be just like an ad hoc basis, not for every registration. So they agreed, so we're going to close this and move forward with that recommendation. Everybody good? Visitors? Okay, next page. Title 5. Registration team would like a decision on whether the tax collector's office be able to create motor vehicle reports. You guys had said that this would kind of muddy the water since we're the custodian of the records. ESC recommends with that we would keep the motor vehicle reports processed through the department, not in the tax collector's office. So if everyone's good with that, we'll close this as well. Visitors? TL Title 6, this is for print electronic title for dealer. This is where we had some confusion with the team on the $10 fee. We got clarification, we brought it to you guys, and you guys had said you wanted to keep it straight across the board. Well, when we took it to ESC, Boyd let us get some more input on this. He said this is not actually a title transfer due to the title being in an electronic status. So the reason why they get charged the $10 is because it's not actually being transferred. They're supposed to be sending a TA out to the tax collector's offices because I think some of the confusion was some of the tax collectors are charging them the $78 transfer fee and then having to do a refund because they are taking it, they are able to get it for the $10. They can also do this on VO for $2.50. So because of the status, it's not actually a transfer. So
They're just printing.
they're just printing.
Okay.
Correct. So ESC recommends no change to the current procedure, keep it as it is. So is everyone okay with that? Any comments?
It's
Visitors?
printing, but it's printing in the dealer name.
Correct. Yes. You guys good? Okay. And that's it for me, the last ones. The last one is dealer services. This is also on scanning in the regional offices, and they're going to follow what we're following with TNR and the rest of them, and the scanning is going to be done up here at headquarters. So she closed this, and is that okay with everybody? Visitors?
Any questions, comments about any of the ones that were specified as PD or CP? All right, Janice, financial, oh, I'm sorry, you have one item that we're waiting on a legal opinion on, and she's gonna review that.
Title team has this is a new one we put on here, for some clarification on the procedure and the statute for surviving spouse transfer. Oh, I'm sorry, the last page, you guys, page 6 of the legal document. We need clarification, surviving spouse transfer, if this exempts mobile homes and vessels, or if it's just on motor vehicles. There was some back and forth with the team and different people from different departments on, yes it did, no it don't. So we're asking legal to give us an opinion on the statute and on the procedure to see, if we're starting to write our business rules with surviving spouse transfer. And because this is a new transaction, we want to make sure we're correct in the business rules and we're following the statute. So we want to send this to legal so they can give us an opinion on it. Any comments?
That's it. All right, financial review, Janice?
Okay. So this is effective, or as of December 31st. And I'll review quickly phase 1 before we move into phase 2. Phase 1, our next fiscal year, which is upcoming with the session, is 1920. Originally, we requested 1.8 million. We are increasing that request a little bit, so that's why it's in red. Currently, our budget for this fiscal year is 7.5. Our actuals as of December 31st are 4.3. We're on track as far as our contracted services and IB&B services, expense for software. We have started purchasing a lot of our renewals for software in this quarter, so we should see that expended within the next couple of months, but we are on track. For fiscal year to date, our budget total was 4.3, and actual to date are the same. Month to date, we expended $927,000 in the month of December. Remaining funds is 3.2. For phase 2, you can see the red outline for 1920 beyond. For 1920, the LBR has been sent in and submitted to recession. We have requested an increase in those funds primarily for IFTA IRP and a few other items. So we should be seeing that within the next hopefully by March, we'll see those amounts go up and get approval on that this year. Current budget year to date for 18-19, our budget's 5 million, actuals are 2.0. Contracted services a little bit under 50%, and the reason for that is a lot of our contracted services deliverables are not until the fourth quarter of this fiscal year. So a lot of that money will be expended at that point. So fiscal year to date's 2 million, actuals are 2 million. Month to date, we only spent 142 in December, and actuals are the same. So remaining funds are close to $3 million. That is it in review, unless anyone has any questions.
Project update, Nathan?
Sure. So good afternoon. So on your last page, you have a report that shows the activity for the 6 project teams that are working on requirement validation. So this report shows what the team is each team is currently working on. So the dealer license team is currently working on the installer licensing and consumer complaints. So the due date for that is February 20th. They are 55% complete. For action items, we're in green. Legacy code is a reflection of the Uniface reverse engineering, but also to a lesser extent some .NET reverse engineering as well as COBOL. So that's true across the board. And then for estimation in yellow, we're anticipating starting detailed estimations next month to lead into the overall development and release plan. So Team 2, the Portal Fleet team, they're working on closing out their first increment. They transitioned to start working on increment 2, which is, you can see the variety of things that they're working on there. For Team 3, at the IRP, that team has just completed their increment 1, which is the draft requirements for the ITN. The team is actually done with that. They completed that ahead of schedule, so they'll be transitioning into working on increment 2 for that team, which is identifying the data integration design for the COT system that's intended to be procured to plug into that part to provide that functionality. Team 4 Titles is working on their increment 2, which is some additional title transactions. The first increment was an original title, front to back, so they're working on additional title transactions as well as stops and ELT provider maintenance. That team is showing in yellow slightly, so that means that they're slightly behind schedule where they should be at this point, but they have a plan to catch back up. Team 5 registrations, they have additional registration transactions. Their first increment was an original regular registration as well as dealer registration and all renewals. So there's a handful of other additional registration transactions that the registration team is working on now. And then Team 6 is the global batch inventory team working on, in this increment, the reports and cashiering. Their increment 1 was inventory, so they're complete with that, and moving on into some more common things. And they're also hosting meetings with across the other teams to talk about anything in common as it touches other things with reports, correspondence, cashiering, making sure that all the other teams are in the loop for that as well. So in addition to that, the other activities going on is that we have completed the first increment of the release plan, which is the order that the phase 2 functionality will be developed. So we have a high-level plan. So we'll be sharing that at the all-hands meeting next week to make sure people are understanding at a high level what that schedule is. And then as we go through, we continue to refine and get more detail, organize those into functional areas and figure out what those milestones are when we actually do start the development. So we'll be sharing that next week with the team. Also, OCM activities are happening, organizational analysis and training and performance support strategy. So just be aware that those activities are happening as well. And then between now, Janice mentioned some additional deliverables. There's some additional technical deliverables coming up in the next couple of months, the migration plan and reporting strategy. So a lot of good activity happening and moving right along. Any questions for the project update?
Communications update, Siki, you want to give an update on the conference?
Yes, a couple of weeks ago, we had a conference call with the ELT vendors. We had originally sent out a survey out to them. I think like 10 or 15 of them responded to the survey. And we had a conference call, went over the results, and asked them anything that we're doing, that we can do in monetization that would make their life easier, or anything, any recommendations. So we got a lot of good feedback on the survey, and the conference call went really well. So we're gonna use the feedback on that to work on our business rules and see what we can make happen for them. So the conference call went really good.
We also are still in the process of trying to schedule this industry focus group meeting that we want to eventually have somewhere in Central Florida. We submitted the list, which was quite lengthy, to ESC, and they asked for some changes and want to make sure we invite a few more folks to make sure we have good representation. So we're still working on that process, and we're going to submit the list to them again at our ESC meeting next week if they approve the list, and we'll start sending out invites and decide where we're going to have that. We're going to need a fairly good-sized place or room to have that meeting, and probably spend a good portion of the day just reviewing where we are for projects, things that we're trying to accomplish, and hearing feedback, but mainly giving an update on the project and status and how we go about things, and some of the requirements that we have been submitted to us previously, those things that are planned, those things that are not planned, or those things that have been deferred. So we'll be sending out invites to that.
What size room, excuse me, would you be looking for?
I think right now we're probably looking at, probably about 80 people, maybe. And that could change next week.
Well, I was thinking I have contacts with Eastern Florida State College. Maybe I could do something big there.
Okay, is that like one of their classrooms or something? That would probably work for us. I'll talk to you offline about that.
All right.
Thank you. Because I was trying to figure out where we're going to do that, so I appreciate that. Any other questions? Mr. Butcher, you have a question? Okay, good. All right.
Bob Prislak, Teletech. Just a clarification. I know you all closed POR2 today, regarding enterprise, being able to do in batch versus individual.
Okay.
Okay. My question is just to verify: is that only for them, or is it open for everyone? I think when you read it, I think it was read as if it was only for, I don't think it clarified one way or another.
Judy, is that?
So I think originally the request came from, we currently have an LPA that was using like a screen
Right.
technology.
Correct.
And so this was to replace that, that technical solution that they're using right now, that we're gonna create a web service to be able to process those transactions. We still have to have meetings with Robert and the business to further define what that access is gonna be and who is gonna, I don't think that's been fully defined yet. But the initial solution was to solve that particular problem with the LPA.
The reason why I brought it up, I think in one of the earlier presentations or discussions, it was just to allow them to do it. So I wanted to clarify that, because I don't think that's ever been clarified.
And I don't think we fully said who. I think we also got a request from Enterprise as well, but it hasn't been decided or defined as to who will have access to this service.
Okay, as long as there's an opportunity to discuss it, just in case, we or another tag agency might be interested in that process.
Do you have a recommendation or something now, or something you'd like to discuss now, or you want to wait?
Well, I'd like to maybe just, have the opportunity to discuss electronic filing, other private tag agencies, or partnerships between a tag agency and the electronic process. I need to think through it, but I don't really want, when this first came out, the discussion was only to allow them. And I really I wouldn't like to see that be approved just for a single company. Andrew?
Yeah, no, I definitely would like to add on to that, in that it was my understanding as part of the contract that authorizes us to exist, that we were not allowed or able to install some type of an overlaying software onto the Fribus systems, which is kind of what screen scraping is. And so we've not kind of explored that option, because that was the understanding that was given to us from the department. But additionally, I'm not, just from kind of like a process perspective, I'm just not really understanding what the difference between what you guys are proposing to allow us to do, what the difference between that and what EFS is. Because essentially it's still geared towards dealers, and I'm not really sure where those kind of circles of overlap are and how those responsibilities fall in as to what essentially prevents us from utilizing this interface to become effectively an EFS vendor outside of the platform that's already there. So if there's a way that the conversation can kind of help more clearly define where those delineators are, that would be super helpful.
All right. And that is something that we will bring and discuss with ESC next week, and also I'm sure that will be something that we discuss in the industry focus group meeting, and also make sure we have input from.
But I think what we also need to say is it would not be a decision made by this board.
Right.
It would be above
Right.
what we decide.
Right. Okay. But I will make sure we get that to ESC and bring back, and we'll have that discussion.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other?
With the legislative session beginning, and of course, titles and registrations, what we're focusing on in phase 2 is huge. And I noticed this happen in phase 1 with driver's license. What is the plan if there's a statutory change that's going to affect programming? What is our plan to not waste hours, production hours, or whatever those things are, on something that we're gonna have to change later on anyway?
Yeah.
Do we monitor that and do we plan for that? Because with the veterans thing and the driver's license side, we shouldn't have got as far down the road, in my opinion, as we did, and now we're having to change it and approve hours to change it.
Yeah, and that is one of the things that we have listed that has caused us some issues on phase 1, and part of that delay. Unfortunately, what we do is when legislative changes occur, the senior VAs work with the operational staff, Des and his staff, and to ensure this is something we need to make in the modernization side of the house as well. To be honest with you, this year, this session, we're still with requirements, and they may throw something at me. It wouldn't be as big of an issue, but once we get it developed and we start developing it, and we have to go back and change things or add things, and that's what's caused us some of the issues in phase 1. A lot of times, there are things that are not that big of an impact, but certainly for the most part, there are some things that are. And for right now, what we try to do is just stay on top of that and make sure that we plan for it. Usually we get a notice from legislative affairs, hey, this is coming up, you all need to think about how you would implement this. Sometimes because we're working on newer technology, we can get it implemented a little bit easier, but sometimes we can't. But really there's no easy way around that. We try to get those things implemented. It helps when we're still in the requirements phase, but once we start development. So this year, we probably be okay. Once we start development, that's where it starts causing us problems.
Yeah.
But you're exactly right.
And if, like for EFS, if there's changes in EFS this year, will you all be addressing that, or is that's been handed off to someone?
Right. So basically, you know, what we do.
I'm just wanting my resources.
Right. Thank you. But basically,
I'm greedy. I
know,
want what I want.
We took part of the, operational staff that we brought over to work on Modus Mods, developers mainly, coupled with staff from Accenture, and we work on all the new stuff. But EFS we finished a couple years ago. That's moved over to the operations side of the house. That's Desi, Cecilia, and April. It was that group. So they're working any changes for EFS. They're going to work on those. We're trying to get to that point with Blake. We just finished motor vehicle renewals. We haven't finished DL renewals, but motor vehicle renewals, we're starting to shift that over. So any changes for motor vehicle renewals with the new system, we're trying to get them on board. So working on that.
Okay.
So that's how that goes.
Well, I was just thinking, as we were going through some of this and offline too, you know, we could have 2 or 3 legislative sessions that heavily affect what we're talking about right now, and I just wanted to make sure that we didn't waste any of our resources.
You're exactly right, and right now, we just do the research to see how those things affect us. One thing that does make it, and will make it a little bit easier in the future is, you know, with the system the way it is, and how old the system is, and, you know, a lot of things have changed over the years that are not, you know, documented in any, you know, paper form or whatever. So now, the good thing about with modernization, we have a tool to track that so we can find those things easier. Once we're finished with this, and with Blueprint is the tool that we use, and Ms. Rose had made it very clear to me that that tool will remain updated, because she's right, if we don't keep it updated, then we wasted this time of documenting everything in Blueprint. That tool is, that's one of the things it's supposed to help us with, is that when there are legislative changes, that we can find those things quickly. We can tell whether changes need to be made, what screens are affected, all of that, if we keep it updated. So that's one thing that she's told me, moving forward, and with Desi and his team on the operational side, once we give it to them, that should be the first place they start in updating it.
Well, that's gonna help, because we fix something now, but we break to it.
We break to it
because we didn't
things.
know they were needed.
Right. Which is why we're having to go through the painstaking process of looking through all of that code, which I wish we didn't have to do, but it will save us later on. So, you really should come. That's the right questions.